Hello listener, welcome to lecture 2. So lecture 2 is introduction to the data storage. So in the previous lecture I showed you, here you can see that there are 4 system tables, system database which was actually created by the MySQL with the SQL installation, and these are the master, model, MSDB and the temp DB. So in this lecture I'm going to explain all this. So these are called the system database. There are basically 2 types of database, system and the user DB. So system database are these 4 which is automatically put out by the SQL, and these are very important in order to support the operation you are doing in the SQL, whether it's running a query, whether you are doing an execution plan. All these, somewhere how is it operating and all is all entirely described into these databases. So the first one is the master database. It is very important one. When you are gonna even create your own database, you will see that this database is created under the master. So you will select the master over here, which I'll show you in the next videos, or maybe in the next few slides, that master DB is selected when you are even going to create your own database. So master database is very important in order to run the SQL. It has all your information about your store procedure, about the login information, about the database you have created. The second is the model DB. So the model DB, it basically defines the structure of the database itself. So even if you are a .NET developer or a Java developer, somewhere those syntax are defined, right? So same way these are defined in this model DB for the database. So now the third database is the MSDB. MSDB is important like when you are doing any kind of an exceptional handling you are doing, when you are doing a SQL agent jobs, task scheduling, all these are taken care by the MSDB. So these kind of sound unfamiliar to you if you are a beginner to a SQL or if you are new to a SQL, but if you when you go into the very advanced level where you really have to do with scheduling the jobs or running the packages, then you will actually understand all these terms. So for this video you just need to understand what all these database significance is for right now, but when you go to the advanced level you will start getting the feeling of all it, what the purpose of all these database are. Then the fourth one is the temp DB. Temp DB is used for the temporary storage. So when you are creating any temporary table or you are carrying out any temporary operations like the joins, sort, somewhere all these need a memory, and this is taken care by the temp DB. What is user database? User database is nothing but the database created by you. So like in the SQL Server 2000, the default was the pubs, Northwind, and now it's an adventure work, but by default the Microsofts are not putting it with the installation. You have to explicitly download it and get attached to your database. So these are called the user database. Now the database architecture. So in the previous lecture where I had the slide to install the pubs, when you had downloaded the pubs, you had come across this kind of a window where you had the MDF file and the LDF file, right? So how the SQL Server use the architecture is that it basically use the data files in order to store all this information. So these are the primary data files, secondary data file, and the transaction log files. So the primary data files is having the extension .mdf. That is what you actually try to attach to your database in the previous lecture for the pubs and for Northwind and for the any of the database. But when you do that, you would have noticed that when you click on the MDF in order to attach it, the LDF was automatically picked up, and that is called the LDF1 is called the transaction log file, and these are the write ahead log file. That's mean any logged activity you are making to an actual database is first getting logged into this log files. Okay, and then is the secondary data file. Secondary data file is like an optional file, and you are running out of a space, or you want to divide your storage into a primary to a secondary like you do on your operating system, C drive, D drive. You break down into a different you break down the entire space to a different disk. So the same way you can do the secondary data files, but right now you really need not to know a lot about it because it's an advanced level. So but files and file groups, you should be knowing it at least what these files and file groups are. When you're going to create the database, or when you will be now when you will be taking any backups, or you will be writing any script, you will see there will be something called the on primary. So what is it? On primary is nothing but a file group. So you can actually tell your database that I want to have this tables or this database on what file group. I can have on primary, you can have on a different file group, and these are really useful when it comes to the partitioning. So for right now, you just need to know that you can even store your database on the different file groups. Okay. Now next is the database creation. Now in the previous slide you had the SQL install management studio, and you were able to open it and connect to it. Now we will learn how to create our database. So I just walking you through all this step, and then I'll show you on the SQL management studio. So what you will do is that when you go over here, you will select a new database, you will create an our database, and or you can create this way or you can use the SQL query. So let's use both the ways. So you have this window, you go here and you say new database, and you will type TEMO demo, and then you hit OK. Okay, this database already exists. Let me delete it first. Demo, delete. This is one of the very shortcut way you can delete it, that you can just right click on it and say delete, and it will delete. So database, new database, and here do you see, have you noticed this primary? This is nothing but a file group on the top here, right? So new database demo, and even over here you can see the file group is the primary. Okay, now you see here the database has been created. Okay, the other way of creating is just delete it using the SQL query. So how you can open a query is here you will see a new query window. You can just click over here and say this. Okay, now write create database demo, and you can hit the F5, or you can simply go over here and say execute. Anything is fine. You can press F5 or execute. Just refresh it. Demo is created. Okay, so let's switch back to slide this one. This is how you can create two ways, using the shortcut one or using the query. And the delete is basically you say a drop database. So either you can just right click on the database and say delete, or you can just simply type drop database and then it will drop it for you. Let me do that for you over here. Let's say when you have a more than a 1 or 2 command, if you just simply hit execute, it will run both the commands. So but in my case, because since demo is already created, it is going to throw an error and it will stop right there. But let's say if you have a multiple commands over here and you think that you want to just select, because I'm just interested in running this command, not the above one. So what I'll do is that I just select this command and then do the execute or the F5, and it dropped it. Okay, or you can, now I'm interested in running the first command, so you can simply comment this one with 2 hyphens, and then you can just say execute. It executed. Okay, okay. Now the second slide says creating a table. Now we have created the table, created the database. Now we want to create a table. There are again the 2 ways. One is the shortcut way and other is using the query. But for the interview purpose, you really need to know by the query. So do not try to explain them the shortcut that okay, you can create table, new, right click, and this way. When they're going to ask you how you can create a table, you actually have to explain this SQL query syntax. So let's do the first is by shortcut way. So you have this demo DB. You can simply go over here and say, oh, it does it. One second. Oh, expand it, tables. Select the tables and then the new table. Okay. You will see over here that the new table, it is asking for what are the columns you want to create, data types, and allow null. Let me see what are data types over here. So I am interested in creating a table, say person, with all these columns. So I have a person ID as an integer, so I'll go back here and I'll say person ID. I'll select this is called the SQL data type, which I'm explaining in next slide. So for right now, or you can just type in the int. You do not want to allow null. This is the way you are saying that, you know, person ID can be null, but ideally it can never be a null. So I'm going to unselect it. All these are explained in the few lectures. Second field is last name, and the data type is varchar. Last name, you can say varchar, and first name, address, maybe 250 words, city, maybe 30. Okay. Oh, okay. So now how to give a name to it. So what the simple way is that you just click on it. It will ask you, do you want to save a table? You say yes, and then you can save it with the name persons. Okay, you have to refresh it in order to see it. So you just simply refresh it and you will see the persons table has been created. Okay, now let's delete it and we will create. This is how you can delete the table. This is a shortcut, but there is a SQL command for it. So simply delete it, and now let's create using the query. So I simply take okay, okay. So have you noticed this address is in blue? That's mean it is identifying it as a keyword. So but we are saying this address is not a keyword, it's just a name given by us. So let's put it into the bracket like this, ankle. Okay, so the person table we are gonna create, and it is going to be created under the database demo, and here the database selected is the pubs. So here you will select a demo, or the other way of doing it, that let's say leave it pubs. Okay, let's leave the pubs. We are creating them. Okay, let's refresh it. Do you see persons here created? No. Why? Because the database selected over here was pubs. So when you go to the pubs, you will see the table got created over here, person. We don't want the table over here. So there are two ways. Either you select the database from here, demo, or you can simply say use demo. Even if you have a pub over selected here, it will use the demo DB and then create this table over there. Then run, execute, refresh it. It's got created. Okay, so this is the syntax that you need to remind, and this is very important, that every SQL command syntax you need to learn for the interview purpose. So create table, table name, then you will say the columns, and then you will also define their SQL data type, which is I'm explaining in next slides. Okay, let's switch to the next slides. Okay, and the other SQL command in order to delete the table is the shortcut I showed you, is the delete. Simply right click delete, or you can use the SQL command drop table and the table name. Now let's switch to data type. What is the data type? So when you are defining a column, you are saying whether it is a number, it is a string, it is a binary, or it is an image type. So you have to define it. So these are called the SQL data types, and I have tried to include here the most commonly used ones. So when you define a string type, when you define a string type, like address can have a numbers, can have a string, and first name last name is again a string. So for a string you either use the n varchar or varchar. Okay, so n char is maximum, like you can use the 4000 character. N varchar you can use the again the 4000 character, but the variable and the fixed one. The difference is that when using the n char, and if you have defined the n char with the length 10, even if your field has only a 2 character, it will still reserve the space for the 10. But n varchar has the variable length. That's mean if even if you have put here the length in the bracket 10, and if your field has only a 2 character, then it will reduce the size from the 10 to 2. So that is the most important thing to know. Max is that it will take up to these many characters. Okay, so these are the types which you can use for the string type. And in the next, so again the char, varchar and text. In the previous slide you will see here the n, and in the next one you will see the n is not there. Why is not there? Because these are the Unicode and these are the non-Unicode. So what is Unicode and non-Unicode? Let's go back to this switch. What is Unicode? It is an international encoding standard for use with different language and scripts, by which each letter, digit or symbol is assigned a unique numeric value that applies across the different platforms and programs. So what happens is that, let's say if you are using the non-Unicode one, and if you have a program you have developed in a .NET and somehow somebody is consuming it in the Java, so you have the non-Unicode, they may have the Unicode. So there is an encoding they need to do. They need to convert their data type to an Unicode data type. So in order to prevent this conversion, which could be a time consuming, depends upon how big your data is, how big your table is, you always want to go with the n varchar or n char instead of the varchar. That is a good practice. There is nothing like a compulsory that always defined by the n using n varchar or n char. No, you can define the varchar too, but the best practice to put is using the n varchar, because it's a Unicode one and it is gonna really save your time when you're gonna design your SSIS package, or when you're gonna transport any kind of a data to the another different platforms, to the Unix, to the Java, or to the different platforms. So that is very important to note. And okay, these are the character string types, and then you have the date types, like you can define the date time, small date time, date, simply date without the time, and then the just time only without the dates. Okay, and similarly for the integer you can use the int, because the ID, I think when you're gonna have a very large database, you don't define the person's ID as an int, because when you have a large database it's gonna cross all this limit, then you are gonna define as a big int. Okay, for that purpose, for the tutorial purpose only I have defined the int, but when you go at work you will see most of the time the IDs are defined as a big int. So how you can define the decimal, currency, money, these are the data types you can use. Okay, next interview question, very important one. What is difference between the varchar and the n varchar? And it is clearly explained over here that what is the difference between these two. So please do not miss it. It is a very important interview question. And thanks for watching lecture 2.